Okay, so what we're trying to do here is show on the top of the page here, on page 29, I believe it is in yours, the more we see, hear, touch, do, the more we learn. In other words, we're talking about involvement in the classroom and getting your students to be involved in it, because one of the reasons is the more we see, the more we learn. The more we see, hear, touch, do, the more we learn, and the more they're done together, the better it is. So in the previous times this morning, we gave you a whole slew of just methods or techniques or things to try this, try this, try this, try this. And if you try something that doesn't work well in your class, you don't ever have to do it again as long as you live. But most of the things work. That's why people don't write books and say, here's 55 things that never worked for me. But some of them do. You just have to try something. You know, you can't stand up and blame the students for not learning. That is really the teacher's part, is to initiate learning. Now, some of them, you'll have to take a ball bat to them or something to, try to get it in. But some people are just that way. But most of them learn and want to learn, and they're here to learn. All right, number one there, the more using the God-given senses. God-given senses. Remember the senses that are given to us? God gave them to the first human being on earth, and everyone's sense. And so they're to use, and they let them know about God before they even knew much about God. And the people in the darkest corners of the earth who've never seen a missionary ever in their life, they know within them there is something up there. There's something greater than themselves, and they experience that when somebody comes, start talking about this God and explains things to them. They've been believing that all their life, but they didn't know what to do with it. Number one, so using the God-given senses allows for maximum learning, maximum retention of what has been taught. That is exactly what I want as a teacher. Maximum learning going on and maximum retention of that learning that's been going on. Now, you look up on the screen here, through many studies on retention, educators find over and over that students retain approximately this. And they retain 10% of what they hear. 10% of what they hear. All right? That's just sitting and listening and to words. But the careful thing for a teacher is you got to watch that if talking is the only thing that happens in a classroom, just talk, or there's no visuals, there's no interaction, there's no things like that. You have to be careful because the largest surveys, most recent surveys done, say that total lecture, just I start, when the bell rings, I start, I talk as fast as I can, as long as I can, as loud as I can, and when it ends, if it just total lecture, the whole thing, the average teacher will say between 8,000 to 10,000 words in a given Sunday school hour. 8,000 to 10,000 words. You can't recall 8,000 words. You can't remember the since before last the guy used. See? So there's got to be something more than just words that's said. That's interaction. That's getting my students somehow involved a little bit more in it like that. So they retain 10% of what they hear, 20% of what they say. So if a question is asked, you respond or get involved in a discussion of some kind, things like that. You remember what you say. It was you felt good about saying it in class. It meant something to the class. It helped in the lesson and all that. And you retain that, of course. The next one is 50% of what they see, That's why a visual of any kind is so good. Lots of teachers around our country don't use visuals very much because it takes a little bit more effort to do that. You've got to find them. You've got to make them, whatever it takes. And some just don't want to spend all that extra time doing that. But visuals, 50% of what they see. See, I could talk to you for a long time today about you need to go after the children and things like that and how significant the children's ministry is. But when I stick this in front of your eyes for one time, I mean in 5 seconds you know exactly what I'm talking about. How significant is it in reaching kids? Well, 85% of everybody who ever gets saved in our churches are between the ages of 4 and 14. That's how significant it is. You can talk that and talk words like that, and it doesn't seem to register. But you look at this for 5 seconds, and you get the idea. You see how significant it really is. That's a visual. And so anytime you can use something like that, it helps. It's going to help you, and it's going to help them especially. All right? And then 90% of what they do, retention, that is retaining it, stays with you longer. It actually will, it stays with you. It'll become a lesson learned, a lesson that you can apply to your own life. Then you're ready to teach others the same way because you know what it meant to you. So that's a good thing there. Now that may be a quiz question here in a few minutes I use because I've got some prizes to give away. I don't want to give them all to the older folks tonight, you see, but we've got 100 grand in here. Oh man, have you ever had a 100 grand candy bar? Man, how about a Baby Ruth? They got a lot of nuts in there, but I'm kind of nutty myself. Butterfinger, I'll take that if I can't find something else. How about 100% real chocolate crunch bar? Man, oh man. I'm telling you, well, some of you get that. Some of you may get a Romans Road. You say, well, give me a Baby Ruth. Or some of these other things. But we're going to ask questions a little bit. So make sure you remember this because you can't look then. Closed book test. Okay. All right. And we're going to watch you. Some of you are going to kind of sneak there and you'll write it on your hand. I've had adults in a class that I say, we're going to have a written quiz a little bit later now. And I give them a hint. That might be good for a quiz question. And they'll take a pen and write it in their hand. So when they have an open book, they don't have their book open. They don't have it at all. They don't need it, And the rascals wind up winning a candy bar or something. It's awful, but that's how they do it. All right. So now, the question is for us, why settle for the minimum? Why settle for the minimum of just retaining 10% of what they hear? The longer you go, the less they can retain of it. Because it's just words all the time. That's why I do notes. I do notes like this that are full page type things because when I get through today, if I ask you a question, most of you probably couldn't even remember it. It's one of the most important things we said. But I want you to go home and reread these, have them again. Now we do this in 4-hour sessions usually in a church, and we have a whole notebook, 70-page workbook, but I put it all down there so you can go home. What did the guy say? On page 30, right there it is. That's exactly what, oh yeah, I wrote it down myself. Look at there. And now they can take that and as they prepare next week, they can flip through some of those pages, and here's 17 ideas right there on how to ask questions or things like that. So that's one good thing you can do with it. So the idea is why settle for the less than the best. Using visuals down below there, I've just listed some of the things. You know these things: a marker board or chalkboard, sometimes flat pictures, overhead projector, flannel graph, objects, all kind of things. There's 15 right there. The book I showed you over here, Teaching Children God's Wonderful Word, that has 200 ideas in it there, just quickie things. And we have some other things that are like that. Anything up here, I know most of you don't have any money to spend anyway, but if anything up here you see, it's $3 off what the cost is on this little sheet right here. Gives you the cost of everything here, $3 off. Unless it's $3, you don't get it for zero. So anyway, all right. Now let's look at this one. The teacher's mannerisms. The teacher mannerisms, how we communicate by words alone. This is one of the largest surveys ever done, and is still in college textbooks today. On how we communicate, what actually comes across is what we're talking about. Not necessarily all the things were said, all the words were said, so forth, but what came across. What did they walk up and take home with them? By words alone, 7%. 7% of my whole lesson. If I prepare for 4 hours and talk for 40 minutes, and only 7% comes across, that's true. By tone of voice, 38%. How I say what I say. how you say what you say, by facial expressions, 55%, your gestures, your mannerisms, and things like that. That's what stays with people. That's what makes an impact on people. And so that's what you're trying to do. You're not up there to put on a show for yourself. You're trying to impact people with the Word of God and say something. Sometimes it's funny, but it helps with the thing you just said there. And so that's what you try to do as a teacher for God. By words alone, by tone of voice, how we say, by facial expressions. Now, that means that 93% of communication is above and beyond the words you say. 93% of communication, what actually comes across, they got it. They grasped what you just said, is above and beyond the words you say. Now, the teacher controls the process used. All right, the subject matter. Look what the teacher controls. Students don't control this. You work all week on your lesson. They didn't even know what the lesson is about, most of them, until they got there. And so you're the only one that even understands what's going to be said today, much less how it's going to be said. How do you get it across? Words used, the verses to be used, whether you go in depth or skim over some area, what's emphasized, what is neglected to illustrate this or not to illustrate that in class. I make that decision as a teacher. You didn't even know I was making decisions like that as your Sunday school teacher. But they do. That's why they prepare so much. That's all on the teacher. So your role gets bigger and bigger all the time. The style of teacher, the methods to be used, use of visuals or not, lecture involvement, stand, move around, use emotion, or just spit it out there. Talk fast, slow, however you want to do it. You're the one that controls that. See, not the student. Your other mannerisms, choice of dress, formal relaxed, stern to positive, tone of voice, facial expressions, eye contact, all that kind of stuff, that's you're in charge of that. You're in charge of all that. So teaching is a big thing. It's a great thing, great role to play for God in a church, on the mission field, anywhere you go. Great role. But the teacher ought to be able to put some effort into the preparation of a lesson, or else it may not go too far. All right. Now, those were the 2 pages that went with the last section. Now we're on orchestrating the children's ministry and getting kids to serve the Lord. That's our goal, getting kids to serve the Lord at an early age. Now, some of you may have been raised in churches that didn't happen. Others, maybe it was totally different in your church. You had a great experience. You learned how to give your testimony at a very early age, and you weren't ashamed to serve the Lord in some way. So, leadership keys for training teachers. Number 1, see the potential when none can be seen. It's there, and that's our role, is to see potential. Some of them, you'll look at them and say, I don't know about that one. You'll see some little old kid come in, usually a little bus kid or the pastor's kid or somebody like that, you know. Somebody else's pastor's kid, all right. But you'll look at them and you say, I don't know. Listen, God can change any kid's heart, any adult's heart. He can change a 104-year-old man's heart if he needs that done in his life. In all my years, I've been through some examples. I used to have a guy named Joe Mills, big old tall, skinny, red-headed guy. The only thing he could do well, he wasn't saved. Half of his family came to church, half didn't. And when I became the youth director at Highland Park, this great big church, he was the first one I knocked on his door, up on the edge of a mountain there in Tennessee. Everything's on the hillside there. And knocked on the door, and his sister came to the door, and I asked her, I wanted to see Joe. And she hollered upstairs, Joe, Brother Thomas is here from the church. And just a couple minutes, I could hear them rolling down those stairs. I say, man, here he comes. And whoosh, bang, out the back door. and headed for the woods. He did that 3 different times on me. And I was just getting started and working with teenagers then. And finally it dawned on me, and I went back the 4th time, and his sister came to the door again. I said, now, I'm going to the back door. Give me just a minute to get back there, and then you call Joe and tell him Brother Thomas is here from church. So I could hear it all because I was standing in the back door, and the back door was open, the screen door was open like it usually is in those areas. And I could hear, Joe, Brother Thomas here for the church. Whoo, looked like tearing those stairs up, man, big old house. Came running out, just hit that screen door, it went wham, wham, and he almost ran right into me. Big old, but taller than I was at that time, was a little teenage boy. And I said, hey, Joe, good to see you, buddy. He had to shake my hands. I mean, we were standing there face to face, you know. Hey, listen, the only thing he could do then is grow hair. And so he did it. He did it well, all the way down to his belt buckle. But that's about all he could do. But for the Lord, he wasn't saved yet. But he came to know the Lord real quickly. He was the one of the first 2 preacher boys I ever had at Highland Park. I saw him preach on the radio for the first time. We had a teenage radio program. And we had a little orchestra there, and we did teenage roundtable discussions and all kinds of things. It was a live radio program, which I don't know if I do it anymore with teenagers. A live program. But I did then. And Joe preached his first message. I didn't tell him it was live. Now I said, Joe, I want you to practice preaching your first message here. We was live as everything, going all over the place. And I saw him preach in front of an interpreter on the mission field. We went on a mission trip with teens for 18 years, and I saw him preach there. And he's been a pastor for over 40 years now down in Alabama. There was another old teenage boy there named Marcel. And he had his father was a deacon. His mom was one of the best Sunday school teachers we had for years and years. Had 2 teenage daughters in our youth group there that were the finest soul winners I've seen out of teenagers in a long time. We had a big youth group, big one. And on Sunday night, we had our youth group right before church. That was, back in those days, it was called the training hour. So it was an hour before church on Sunday night. This guy, this little rascal would wait till I was 5 minutes from ending our session, from dismissing. Not beginning, dismissing. He'd come in the back door back there, walk all the way around that big crowd of his peers, walk all the way around here and come right up and sit down right in front of me. And he'd sit there for about 2 minutes, and he'd get up and he'd go like this at me and walk out the door. His 2 sisters were sitting there. Dad was a deacon. Mom was a Sunday school teacher. And then there was Marcel. Well, he's been on the mission field, I think, 47 years now. You know, God just hadn't quite got a hold of his heart yet. But see, you don't give up on anybody. No matter who it is, you don't give up. You just keep after him and go and go. So, a lot of things like that. We talked about some of those this morning, just, holy terrors and things like that. Our pastor, Dr. Charles Keene, had been there for years. Dr. Lee Robertson, at that time, had the 2nd largest church in the nation. He was a little holy terror-like. First time he ever went to Sunday school, he laughed at the teacher, laughed the whole time through. He was about 14 years old. They finally got him to come, and he sat there and laughed at her the whole years. Her name was Daisy Hawes. And they finally got him to come back again. He didn't laugh that time. And he went home, got down on his knees at home, and gave his heart to God, and came there to that place and built the 2nd largest church in the nation. We had 364 missionaries. He had 64 branch churches all up and down the hills of Tennessee. That guy that laughed at the Sunday school teacher, oh yeah, he did that because he wasn't saved yet, you see. God can do anything he wants to do with anybody he wants to do it, and he can use one of us to reach those people. I I started Bible clubs there. We had, at our biggest, we had 40 Bible clubs going with 1,000 teenagers in them every week around that city. And one of the students, they were student-led, but college students. And so I had 5 students work each club, 40 of them. And this guy came in one day, one of the students, and you couldn't hardly understand him. He was a kind of an older student, but he started talking to me and had a heavy lisp in his voice. You'd have to almost look right at him and look at his mouth and listen to him to get exactly what he said. And he had a little funny laugh, something like I do, I guess, sometimes. Maybe I got that from him, I don't know. But he just laughed all the time. It just drive you nuts, You just almost didn't want to be around him. But he convinced me he needed a Bible club to lead. And so I gave him one. And he had the largest Bible club out of all 40. He won more to Christ out of that club than anybody else did in theirs. And he's been on the mission field for, I guess, close to 50 years now. God will do anything he wants to do with you, anything. And he'll empower you to do it. And you don't have to worry about him. He's going to be with you every step you take. But training is, I just skimmed some of this now. Training is what adults do for children. Look to go the extra mile. Now, some of these you can, if you're interested, you can come back and reread some of your notes there a little bit later. See here, I give an illustration. Here's you have to go the extra mile sometimes. You can't just teach 30 or 40 minutes one time a week and never even think of your kids anymore. You got to pray for them. You got to be around them sometime. You got to go to a ball game. And I used to go to a ball game, and I wasn't in a ball game 20 minutes, but I'd go, and if it was a soccer game, I'd go and I'd grab the kids' attention. Yeah. And I'd cheer him on for just a little bit, and then all of a sudden I'm gone. Didn't matter whether I stayed 10 or 20 minutes. He knew I was there. And I wanted him to know I was there. But you got to spend some extra time somewhere along the line if you're going to touch the lives. You can teach lessons from now on, but what we want to do is really to teach the lives. This is where children are motivated to be young preacher boys or tell Bible stories and all of that kind of stuff. But I see churches even today that there'll be 40 miles. I've known churches 10 miles from a regional competition. And some of you are probably aware of regionals. We have some brochures over there. I'll show you some of the kids in action in just a little bit here. But I've known churches within 5-10 miles of where we hold the regional and haven't been in 15 years, haven't brought their kids in 15 years. And other churches will drive 250 miles every single year to get their kids to that place right there too. What's the difference? Leadership's the difference. They're not going to put any more into it than showing up on that night, working in the workbooks or something, leave early, and that's it until next week. So you've got to have something more than that inside you that's going to make you a leader who will touch and do something in the lives of the children. On page 50, I believe it is, I went on and gave you some more ideas there. These kids learned how to do the clearest presentation of the gospel, to give the story behind the great hymn, or give a missionary biography, or one of your missionaries. They would get in all the Bible events, learning things like the story, chapter, truth, Romans Road, John 3 relay, Old Testament books, a wordless book series, and on a Bible quiz team, they could play an instrument or sing a duet or trio or an ensemble. They could enter Christian writing and Christian art events, glorifying the Lord. They could, but they don't. Why? Because in most cases, there's not one leader at that church that'll take the extra effort. Let me show you something that kids can do for God. For one thing, they can learn how to give a testimony. As a child, yes, as a child. We have little badges and things that motivate them a little bit more, but a child can do that. We're going to teach them how to give a testimony. What do you say when you give a testimony? Then they have to write out their own testimony, bring it to club one night, stand before their leader, and they will work between their what they've written down and how to give a good testimony. And then when they think the kid is ready, they have to give their testimony to mom and dad at home, have to give it in club one night, give it in their Sunday school class, and give it to 2 or 3 kids in the neighborhood. But again, leadership's not over. Leadership is when I take 2 or 3 junior boys out there myself and I walk down the neighborhood. I don't just tell them, now go down those 5 streets and give your testimony. Little kids are scared to death. They're scared more than the adults are, to do that. And so leadership leads. See, that's what it does. It says, come on, son, follow me. I want to show you how God can use you. And I'm going to put my little guy out there in front of another little guy the same age. And we can talk about coming to club and Sunday school and all that. But I'm going to stop and say, hey, listen, you ought to hear Joe's testimony. It's great how Joe become to know the Lord. It's his testimony. Joe, won't you give your testimony, son? Well, there's nothing left to do but for little Joe to give his testimony to this little guy right here. See, but leadership made that happen. See, you put things together. You give them a place to serve the Lord. And that's very important for you in that time. Here's a good news thing. It's got 7 lessons in here on how to tell others about the Lord on the child's level. You can tell, God can use you to tell the good news. Using the Bible to tell the good news. Using the Romans Road to tell the good news. Using the Wordless Book to tell the good news. Using your testimony to tell the good news. Using the gospel tracts to tell the good news. Using your Bible to tell the good news, and so forth. See, we can teach them how. We can train them. We can provide that opportunity to take them out and do something like that, and they'll do it. And these kids will start serving the Lord early on in their life. Let me give you a couple of ideas on, here's a Christian poem. We have Christian writing contests 4 times a year that this goes on. They can bring them to regional, they can send them in and we judge them and all that kind of stuff. Let me give you an idea of what they can do. Here's one, here's a 3rd grader. This ought to be good. Up in heaven, down here. That's the title. Up in heaven, there's streets of gold. Down here, there are clunks of mold. That's pretty good. Up in heaven, Jesus is light. Down here, we always fight. Up in heaven, there will be no sun, S-U-N. Down here, there has to be one. Up in heaven, I like to sing. Down here, I like to praise the King. The end. That was the first time this child has ever written a note to God. They can do anything. You ought to see some most beautiful things. I've never seen a Hallmark card as beautifully describing the Lord as kids can do. Here's one, probably one of the better ones we've had from a 6th grader. And this one has 3 parts. Let me just read one part of it, and you get the idea. It's a 6th grader, and it's entitled, When I Murmur, Well Done. This was done in the early 70s. It's called... here's one by a 5th grader. Rewards, I like this one. When others cheat and steal, I look to heaven for a seal. On what I should and should not do, He looks after me, He'll look after you. If I do what I'm supposed to, it makes Him very glad. If I do stuff to hurt others, I'm sure it makes Him very sad. When I got saved, I got a promise of a great big mansion. I'll also get a robe and crown and free buffet all the time. All right, there's a 5th grader. Now let's move up a little bit here to a 6th grader. This one's entitled, When I Murmur, Well Done. Talking about the Lord. He was sitting right there. He looked so out of place. He was rugged and worn. He had scars on his face. The people walked by but passed right on by. Not one even smiled. Not one caught his eye, for this was God's house. So why was he here? Church wasn't for him. That surely was clear. Well, I couldn't look back. I was much, much too proud. And then I heard Jesus speak. He was clear, though not loud. He said, "My child, I was beaten and scarred, black and blue. I look worse than this man because I loved you. He's not quite as prestigious or godly as some, But to me, he is special because he has come. I've told you before, won't you please try to see, show love to this man, and you'll be loving me. So accept him and love him. Be gentle and kind. And when you look at his scars, pretend you see mine. There's 2 more pages that go on like that. Never read anything like that before. Who did that? 6-year-old girl. I read that to her father down in Florida one morning. And I said, let me read you a poem. He got through and he had tears in his eyes. He said, that's one of the most beautiful things I think I've ever heard. I said, you know who wrote that? No. Your daughter. Oh, yeah? That's what he said. Oh, yeah? Didn't have a clue, you know. But some worker took that little girl and others and little boys and just give them an assignment to do that. They can do stuff like that. Sure they can. And so I list all kinds of things here that they can do. A lot of you have been in club ministry or others know that. Let me show you some of the slides I think I've got up here somewhere. Why did I have that up there? Push... Boy, I did this the first time. I'm all messed up. This is mission. We have a mission, kids mission program at our church. Kids Missionary Conference. When we have our big conference, we take all the kids most nights except one. We take all the kids back into a big area, and we bring the missionaries that are not speaking. They're just going to sit there and listening to the others speak. We bring them back there where they can get eyeball to eyeball with missionaries. And we break it up and do a whole lot of things with them there on a missionary conference. And that way they can answer questions and do all kinds of things. Here's some of the regionals if you've never been to one. Right or wrong relay. These are question answer from the Bible. These are kids behind there doing the whole puppet show. Not adults, there are kids back there. And these are the relay games that have a lot of the things that they learn. Some of these games are over here at the end. I don't have time to demonstrate them. Some of you have been through them before. But they can learn the wordless book. They can learn the colors in it. They can learn the verses for it. They can do all of that type thing with a game. Here's a story chapter truth. One of them is put on the table over here. And they can learn all of that. As they go through, they learn the story, the chapter it's in, and the truth of that story, all in a game. Learning the New Testament themes, learn the books of the New Testament and the theme of every book in the New Testament. Do the same thing with Old Testament, words from the Word here. I want them to know words like faith and mercy and holy. There's 30 Bible words there that most kids probably couldn't say to you what it means, but they hear it all the time. Over and over and over they hear it, and a lot of times it's from teachers who never stop and explain words like that. The teachers know what it means, but the kids don't. And so we have about, I think, 14 games or something like this. Tabletop, you play off there, you do relays, run up, they scream their heads off and all that kind of stuff and go on. Then we got the missionary cards, around the world missionaries, 16 missionaries all around the world. We put it in a game form like this again. And that's a great one. Here's from Iranjaya, Margaret Stringer, one of the greatest missionaries. She spent 40 years with the headhunters, lived in a tree most of that time, shimmied up a tree and lived there most of her time. 40 years she spent. Walked on that place. They had never seen a white person, ever. She walked on there. In fact, they put her down with a helicopter, and the helicopter wouldn't even land because they were cannibals. They killed and ate people, and she and 2 of the natives went down. And in 5 minutes, they were standing in the longhouse, which is where the tribes would go to war and bring back their bodies, and they would cook them and eat them right there. They were headhunters. And she went there. She went to Dr. Robertson after college. She got out of Tennessee Temple. She walked in his office and said, Dr. Robertson, I want to go to the headhunters. Little college lady, just got out of college. I want to go to the headhunters. He said, you want to what? I want to go where nobody seems to be going. I'll go. Amazing. She lives in South Carolina. She goes to churches. I don't know if you ever had her here, but man, I'm telling you, powerful, powerful. We get missionaries like that right in front of our kids all around them. And it's wonderful, wonderful. So these are just some of the things that we do, and the rest of them are mostly Master Club, learning things like that. We do it in relay form, and you have fun, scream your head off, and yet you learn it at the same time. And all kind of fun type balls and singing, and here's an object lesson, and a young preacher boy right there, and they may be teaching a lesson as a Sunday school lesson there. These are crafts and things that they make ahead of time. They can enter them in the mailbox contest 4 times a year. Here's one, they can bring them to regionals to put them in. Here's one of the young girls teaching a Bible lesson, and all kind of awards and things, young preacher boys. And that guy had his dad's tie on, didn't he? way down about here. But it's a great thing, and all kind of crazy and fun games, and music of all kinds, and all that, Christian art, Christian writing, just like I read to you. All those type things are there for these kids. All kind of things you can get them into. Now, let me check my time again. All right. So let's go on over to, I'm not going to read all this for you, but it's here. It'll help you. The next page there is encourage children to sign up for these events. The I will, if you will, they'll sign up better that way. Selecting workers for the training. This just gives you a lot of ideas that we give out all the time in regional competition. Let's go on over to 52. Bible object lesson. The rest of these copies here just give you the gist of what we do, like a Bible object lesson. Well, we give you the basic rules there. That's exactly what we use at regionals. In other words, your leaders get a whole regional book, and that is exactly what you're going to do. The next page has how we judge the object lesson. We're going to judge it on, does it attract interest? Does it relate to the lesson the first 2 or 3 minutes that you get into it? Then the presentation, evidence of preparation, eye contact, facial expression, gestures, confidence, and so on. And I just put several in there. Bible storytelling, do the same thing there. Missionary biography, we do the same thing there. Young preacher boys, all these are just some of the events that we have open to kids. But they learn how to do that at an early age is what we're talking about. And that's when you get kids serving the Lord early on. And that's a great thing to be involved in and do.